In fact, I think it's a bad idea to cold call. I mean, but a musician has to market himself. So fortunately, always having these music director jobs, I'm composing music for the singers that I have. So for those, so like for that, my first church job, I was writing music for that choir. In my late teens, and so I'm always writing music for the choirs that I'm director of. So at this place, I'm writing music for them. I mean, they sing something of mine pretty much every week, and so I'm constantly writing music for them. So you are establishing yourself, over the years with a large body of people. I mean, you have a captive audience every week, you know, more or less hearing your music. So the word gets out what you're doing, and people. A woman just yesterday actually. She's a professional singer. She took a screenshot. I don't know where she was singing, but she said, "Oh, we're singing you tonight," and she just sent me that little text. So the word gets out, and it's largely word of mouth. And it's always been that way with the history of music, but now with social media and the internet, things get out really quickly. So I'm able to reach the whole globe now, whereas that before that would have taken decades if it would have happened at all.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Mark Anthony, and I am here today with Kevin Allen, and we are on the Phwealthy Podcast. And this is where we talk about everything positive, healthy, and wealthy. And I met Kevin out here when I was doing some Uber rides because I do Uber on the side. And he agreed to tell me about what he does. So we're going to have a conversation about that. So thank you, Kevin, for being on my podcast today. I really appreciate you taking out the time out of your busy schedule to, talk to me so I can hear more about your story and just, how you live your life.
Well, thank you, Mark
Positive,
Anthony.
healthy,
I'm
and
I'm
wealthy.
glad to do it. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So, just to get started, can you tell me a little more? Can you tell us about, your passion for music? Because, well, I'm sorry, but before we getting started, can you just talk about your childhood and, growing up? I know that you're into music, but can you talk about also like what you do today and how you got there?
Of course. Well, I mean, I'm a native Chicagoan. I was born in Bronzeville, and in Bronzeville, there's this Catholic church, down the street from our house of Holy Angels, and I became a student there from kindergarten through eighth grade, and that's really where it all began. I grew up in a household where exploration and curiosity was something that was encouraged. I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house, and she had the World Book encyclopedias, and I would just sit in that dining room and just read. I think I read, between the ages I could read up until high school, probably that whole set of World Book encyclopedia. And she had the regular set and plus the children's set, so I'm sure I read cover to cover
That's good.
all
So
of those
reading
books.
was a big thing growing up
Oh
for
my
you.
goodness,
You read a lot.
reading was such a passion of mine, and it still is. I mean, I'm currently like reading like I would say 30, 35 to 40 books simultaneously. I'll read a chapter and then put this one down, and on all different subjects, music subjects, history, which I'm a huge fan of, world history and local history as well, and fine arts, just you name it. My interests are quite varied as far as reading. And so, out of that kind of home life that encouraged curiosity, the same thing was true at the school. And our school, uh, as the teachers at our school were the school sisters of St. Francis, based in Milwaukee, and so some of those sisters were stationed at Holy Angels School, which was the parish school of Holy Angels Church in Bronzeville. And those sisters were just really about education and not just thinking of the knowledge that they had to present to the children, but also looking at the whole child and really with love. I mean, I pretty sure I know for a fact because I was recently at I think the 80th birthday of of one of the sisters that was at the school. She was the associate principal when I was there, but she eventually became the principal. She's no longer at that school, but there were so many alumni from like I think maybe the they graduated like in the 60s, I mean, so it's just all sorts of people up until graduates from the school from the 80s and 90s, and all of these folks were saying how much they loved these sisters and how much care they gave. So it's not something that's just subjective with me that I felt, but I think most students at that school thought that these women gave us a lot. And the sisters weren't the only teachers at the school. We also had lay teachers, men and women, and also priests were also teachers at the school.
Got you, got you. Okay, so you grew up in Chicago, but while you were growing up, you went to a Catholic school and you were around a lot of great priests and great people of Christ.
Absolutely.
So, what do you do now? So what's your profession?
I'm a composer. I write what we would call classical music.
Okay.
Um, most people know my choral music that I write for choirs, but I write for orchestra and opera. I recently premiered an opera in Iowa City. That was great. So if there's anyone that needs an opera written, I'd be happy to write another opera. I would like to do more of that. Opera's an expensive toy, though, so it's hard to get opera commissions.
When you say it's an expensive toy, what do you mean there?
Well, I mean, you not only, okay, you have to pay the person to write the music, so that would be me. Then you'd have to pay the person to write the libretto. That's the words, it's basically a play that's sung. And so there's no spoken dialogue generally in opera. And so that's a huge expense there. And then you have all of the singers. So you have the principal roles, the leads, and then often there's like a chorus or secondary roles. So that's yet more expense. And in order to prepare this production, you have to have rehearsals. So, if people are coming week after week, you have to, pay for their time. And then you have the orchestra, and then you have the sets and the costume. So as you can see, the dollar signs are just
Yeah, that,
mounting. Opera is I'm sure many people can't imagine when they see a production. They see that performance, but that involved rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, and makeup people and sets and costumes and lighting and sound. It's a huge undertaking.
interesting. Okay, but you don't focus on opera. You're thinking about getting into it though,
I,
right?
no, I've composed three operas, but
Three
I
operas.
would like to do a lot more because
Do a
it's a
lot.
lot of fun.
I see. Okay, nice. But so instead of operas, though, most of what you do, and I just want to be clear for the people watching, when you say you write music, you're actually writing the notes on the sheet
Right, that the performers use to perform.
to
Right.
perform, and that's
So I
going to
never write
be
the words, just the music, the notes,
that's the notes, and they can either sing that or
or
play
play it.
that, right? And
Exactly.
it just depends on
And
what
what
they
it
choose
is,
to
right.
do with it.
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay. So, you don't do operas, but you do just more, would you just say classical
Yes, a lot of
music
music for choirs. So
choirs?
most of my customers want music for their choirs to perform in churches, and so some of my choral music or music for choirs, it's not necessarily church music, but I would say 95% of it is. And so these are pieces that that they would perform during a mass or during some sort of prayer service or some sort of special event to highlight like an anniversary or a wedding or a funeral even. So anytime that you need music, especially in a religious service, that's when people call me to write music for them.
Interesting. That is very cool. I know I told you this before, but honestly, I've never really met anyone who writes like sheet music,
Right.
especially for classical choirs for sacred music.
But it's
So,
funny you say that because I was having a great conversation with an Uber driver. And when he asked what I did, I said, "Oh, I didn't think they made those anymore."
yeah, I mean, you really don't hear about
Right?
that at all. You
Exactly.
know, even if like I've always been into music, but more so like hip hop,
Right.
R&B, rap, and everything. And you really don't have people talking about sheet music at all. Especially today, you have like all this electronic. hardware to make music. You
Right.
know, you just put the keys on, you just punch the
Yeah.
keys and it comes up with the notes on the
Exactly. And
computer.
it
You
never
really
sees paper.
Yeah, it never really even sees paper. Honestly, I mean, I'm trying to think. The only time it would probably see paper is if like they're doing it for some kind of award show
Exactly.
or a
Exactly.
concert, but like a big concert. Because even
Hmm.
at concerts, it's just like a DJ.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I feel like you really do have to be more skilled and know more about like music theory because you're working with notes and stuff.
Exactly.
So, I do want to touch back on your childhood, but before that, I want to hear more about your process of writing music. You know, do you go into like a dark room and just like think about music, or you know, how does that look?
Well, it's when you have a deadline and you need to get it done, that's what you do. You get it done. So I'm often asked this question, oh, what do you do to get inspired? Well, inspiration is an important part of really of life. We have to be inspired to do many things. We have to be inspired to get out of bed, right? And but there are these driving forces. We get out of bed to go to work because we have responsibilities. We have to pay our bills, keep the lights and the gas on, and food and shelter for our families. So all of those motivations can be inspiring, but the actual process of writing music is not, I'm not walking in some forest, staring at the sky, saying, oh, now I can go write the music. When you call the plumber to fix the leak, he doesn't get inspired to do it. He goes and does the job, and it's the same with the composer. You need a string quartet. He sits down and writes a string quartet. Now, some projects are easier than others, just like in any job. If you're a roofer, you have easy days and hard days. It's the same in composing music, and I never know when I sit down if a particular project is going to pose a challenge for me.
Mm, okay, so you don't really necessarily have like a regular kind of like ritual as far as when you go to write a song or write some music.
I think I do. I mean, anything that you do repeatedly, you do often, and I've done this, and we'll get back to my childhood. I was 10 years old when I said, okay, this is the plan. And that's been more than a few years ago, right? So anything that's done over and over can become ritualized. And so it becomes a process. And for sure, I've found some ways to be more productive because, early in writing, you're writing and you get stuck, and you can't get out of a certain area, and so you can become frustrated, and then you stop working. And so I found a way to get over that, and I've refined it over the years. So now I'm always working on several pieces at a time. Just like I said, I read several books at a time. I do this also in my musical process. So let's say if I have on my desk, I have to write a string quartet. I have to have a mass. That's a 5 to 6 movement piece. For choir. Used in church. If I have to write one of those, and then I have to write an opera. I have these 3 projects on my desk, and I go to write the string quartet, and it's going great. And if I run into a problem where I can't, bridge this gap in the musical development, in the past, I would, just kind of, muscle it out and try to work it out. Now I give it just a few minutes, and if I'm stuck, I just move on to the next piece, and then start working on the mass. Then when I'm maybe exhausted or just mentally exhausted from working on that, then I go to writing the opera. That way, I can have longevity and keep a good working day and get a lot done and chip away at the pieces. And then deadlines come into it also. If the mass is due before the other pieces, I'll obviously work on that a little more and give it priority. But when I sit down in the morning, I get up, make a cup of coffee, I look to see what pieces I have to work on, what's due first, what's been going quicker, and there's a temptation when a piece is going really well, you just want to work on that because you're having fun, because that's the part of the process that's great. Hearing people perform my music, I've done it long enough. Recently, uh, I was present for a concert where they performed a lot of my music, and this woman came up to me. She said, "Oh, it must be so thrilling for you to hear your music performed." And of course you have to be gracious and say, "Well, yes, of course," but yes, it's thrilling. But I've done it so long that I'm thankfully I'm used to it. But what's more thrilling for me is that process of writing it and the rehearsals, getting it ready. And I'm certainly grateful and happy that it's performed. I mean, I guess that I could say that that goes without saying. But it's that process that is really a lot of fun because you're discovering things. You have an idea, you're putting it to paper or to computer. Either way, you're having this creative process. And sometimes it goes in unexpected places, and that's where the fun is.
Interesting. It is interesting that so you like the process more than the finished product.
Oftentimes, but sometimes when you give it some time, you give it some space, and I'll hear a piece that I wrote 5-10 years ago. I'm thinking, oh, I still like that, or something like, that wasn't my best, but it's out there. Just like you have 4 or 5 children. It's like, oh, that third one's a little not so great, but
Right.
well, we're not gonna put it back. We're not gonna put them away, right? We'll
Right.
just deal with it.
Right.
It's exactly the same way.
Okay. Curious though, when you hear people performing your music, do they ever change it up from what you wrote and maybe like change a note or something? And you're like, wait, I didn't write that like that.
That
Or is that
that
allowed? How does that
does
what
that
does that
does
happen?
happen. Just like your children, right? People may treat them some kind of way, and you just what can you do? You can't do
Right.
much about it, right?
Right.
It's kind of the same with music, and you just have to let that go, and that's part of that process too. You got to let your babies go out into the world and make a way for themselves. So
Okay.
some performances are better than others, and I've heard, online, people listen to my music online. They say, "Oh yeah, I heard your piece," and I'm like, "Yeah, I had nothing to do with that. Someone bought the music and they performed it and then put it online, so that I had nothing to do with that at all." And so sometimes people send me stuff that I hadn't heard at all. I didn't even know it was out and had been online for like a year. Like, oh, I didn't know. And sometimes the performances are really, really good. And sometimes, to your question, they'll do something that I hadn't intended and it worked and it's good. I'm like, that's the beauty of music, that it is malleable in that way. And I mean, of course, there's some performances that are not that great,
Hmm.
but people butcher the best of composers. So who am I? Who am I to contest it? So it's all right.
Right. Okay. And going back to your childhood, you said that it started at 10 years old. So I just want to hear more about that. How did you get into the sacred music and not necessarily like the hip hop or rap scene?
Right.
Like what was it that drew you to the sacred music?
Well, I was in school, so 10 years old. You're in, having school music classes. So I had the same music teacher from kindergarten through 8th grade. Sister Lorraine was who is no longer with us. She died a couple years ago. This was a great woman, a great teacher. She taught us so much, not just about music, but just about just being good people. She was a really great role model, as many of our teachers were. And she created a space, particularly for me, that I could explore music in a way that I was never that kind of teacher. I have to be hands on to everything. Okay, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? She was not like that. And I remember going back to her, I don't know if it was in high school or maybe later, and just asking her, like, sister, I don't remember. Like, when did you teach this to me? And when did I learn? I was just asking her very specific questions. And she smiled at me. She said, Kevin, I didn't teach you any of those things. I gave you some books. You would come down to the music room. There's a cloakroom. She said you would learn an instrument, and then you would teach it to the other children. So we used to have a little wind ensemble in our school. It astonishes me. I have no idea how I was able to teach instruments that I didn't know how to play. I knew theoretically by what I read, but I was reading these method books and then teaching my classmates. And this teacher, Sister Lorraine, just sat and observed. and she just let us do that. That's what a gift. You
That's
know, I
crazy.
know it's like,
You were teaching other students how to
yes,
play certain instruments,
yes,
but you didn't
yes,
know how to play those instruments.
correct.
You just really knew the notes
What I
of
read
music.
in the book, and I would
Oh,
tell them, yeah,
oh
that's
wow. And
ridiculous.
it helped them, and they
Well,
got
we
good.
used to play. We would play at events. We played at graduation. We we played music. We played music out of these books.
Interesting.
It's insane. I hadn't remembered that until she said it, and I remember running into a classmate on Michigan Avenue by Water Tower Place, and she recognized me. She said, "Kevin Allen." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I haven't seen you in long." She could not get to how you doing, good to see you. She went right to that moment. She said, "Oh, you used to drive us crazy when we used to have our little music classes, and you said, no, it goes like this and goes like this." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So that was a memory, and I'd forgotten that. I didn't remember any of that. So apparently, I was a little tyrant.
That's crazy. And how old were
And
you
she
at the
played. That
time?
was maybe 10 or 11. And
Okay.
so she played clarinet. So I taught her to play clarinet.
And you didn't
I
play
didn't play
clarinet.
clarinet.
That's
My instrument
crazy.
was trumpet. I played trumpet, but I hadn't remembered that I taught myself and then taught the other children. Now, eventually, I did have instruction in those instruments later on, but but the fact that she could create that space where to let the students explore that way in a positive way and supervising it in a way that fostered what we were doing, supported what we were doing, and didn't inhibit us. That's my hat's off to that. I could never be that kind of instructor. That's
Yeah, and I think
right.
that's also good that she let you guys do the whole like peer to peer learning
Right.
instead of just, being up at the front of the class like do this, do that.
Right.
And it's like
Right.
you're learning from other kids your age.
Exactly.
You can probably describe it to your other student, like the other peers, in a way that they can understand. Like maybe bringing
Exactly.
toys into it or,
Right.
whatever that you
Yeah.
guys talked about back
I
in the
mean, so
day. But
huge kudos to her for that.
yeah.
That's next level wisdom, right?
That is,
Yeah.
that really
So
is.
so
But it sounds like you had a true gift from God though, like as
absolutely
for well, like a couple, like one with music, but also just teaching yourself certain things,
right.
because you said that she gave you those books, you read the books, and you read a lot when you were a kid as
I was a
well.
reader, definitely a reader.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Like I feel honored right now to be in your presence of
Thank you so
somebody
much.
with such like gifted music talent like
Yeah, it's
that.
beautiful. And I look at the whole trajectory. I mean, where it began and where I am now. And for me, it is pretty miraculous. I mean, how at every key point in my development, there was some mentor at the right place just to guide me along. And sometimes I rebelled mildly against, some of these teachers, but, and I think for my benefit, in particular, there's one professor in particular that I just kind of drove him crazy with the kind of music I'm doing now,
Mhm.
because I was writing kind of classical church music for the Catholic Church, which was music in Latin, and some people, and he rightly said, he's like, "Well, your church," because he wasn't Catholic. He said, "Yeah, well, your church doesn't do this kind of music anymore, so you're kind of wasting your talent, you're wasting your time." Writing these pieces, no matter how beautiful they are. I mean, that's just kind of, it's useless. He didn't use that word, but he just thought it was just kind of foolish that I was really pouring all of this energy into something that, you know, for an organization that didn't want it, creating a product for someone that doesn't want it.
But that was just your church that didn't want it, not necessarily like the
But who
church in
else? Who
general.
else is gonna take a bunch of pieces in Latin? Certainly not the Baptists,
Hmm,
right? But
right.
but what he couldn't know, and what I couldn't know, is that later on, um, the Latin Mass started being said more and more around the country, and in Chicago in particular. And so a lot of churches were trying to establish choirs to sing for these masses, and I had made a point of studying all of these the Latin liturgy, and so I was ready. So I was ready with a quiver full of music. I'm like, here, I have all these masses I wrote, have all these motets that I wrote, so let's do them. So what he couldn't have known, and I didn't know either, that this music would be used, and some of that music that I was writing then is still being sung.
That's
And
great.
that's so yet again, that's when I say, when I look back and just see that it was miraculous. No one could have told me that, right? We didn't have a crystal ball. So, oh yeah, you're going to write all this music that doesn't make any sense right now, but it's going to make sense 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's
That's a little
crazy.
mysterious.
Yeah, hey, God works in mysterious ways.
Indeed, indeed.
So I'm curious though, like when you were 10 and writing songs or writing music and everything, like I'm just curious, what made you go in the direction of the sacred music and not like what was popular? Because I just know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like, but sacred music wasn't as popular at that time,
It
was it?
still isn't.
I mean, you're right.
It never has.
I
I
mean,
should say
it's
it never
still
has been, but not in our lifetime, right?
right. So I'm just curious, what drew you towards that? Is that what you were just everything you known the whole
It,
time?
it,
Did you
it
ever have an experience with the secular popular music?
well, I mean, I shouldn't say most children, but certainly at that time, I mean, I had no connection to that music outside of it being on the radio or hearing, my parents had, record collections and they would listen to music. That didn't seem like something that was possible, but the music that I was writing, I mean, it was the kind of music we were singing in school. So there was a
Mm,
direct connection to what I was doing. So I heard this music. And so I'm thinking, I will write something like the music we sing in school.
mm,
Now, our choir didn't sing. We didn't have a full diet of classical music. We sang kind of light popular music too. We kind of sang all over the map. But the music that kind of resonated with me was the classical music. So that's a good
right.
question. That's a good question. I have no idea why I went in that direction, but that's kind of what spoke to me.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, especially at an age like that, kids are usually trying to follow, what's popular, be cool and stuff like that. And, I know sacred music wasn't popular, but it does make sense if that's what you were around at school all the time, singing that in school. It does make sense. So,
Mm.
curious though, when did you realize, okay, I want to be a music writer because I know that was at a young age.
Right.
So what was it that light bulb came on like, all right, this is what I'm gonna do.
Because and this is in my adult head, because I'm sure as a child I was thinking about it in exactly this way, but I did know I'm thinking of something. I wrote it down, and oh my goodness, what it must have looked like was probably looked ridiculous, but I had an idea. I was able to put it from my mind into some concrete form on paper, share it with other people, my fellow classmates. And that process was thrilling. Like I mentioned before, how much the process was so much fun. And that was the case then. I'm thinking, this is really nice. I can think of something, put it in a communicable form, and then have other people perform it. That's like, yeah, I want to do that. And so, it's that simple. It was just that simple. I just, the gratification I received from that was just insane. And then going on in high school, I was writing a lot of music that I was inflicting on my fellow classmates. And in adulthood, I there was a concert around UIC of some of my instrumental music. It was like a concerto, a trumpet concerto, and some other pieces. And an old classmate from high school who played trumpet. He's a music teacher now in the suburbs, but he came to that concert. And I hadn't seen him in years, and I barely recognized him. And we were like really close friends. Like, oh my goodness, good to see you. And then he brought up yet another memory, just like my friend from grade school with her clarinet. He said, "Wow, this is nothing like that music you used to write for us to sing in high school." I'm like, man, how are these people? This is like the first thing he said. So
They could
apparently I made an
understand that.
impression on these people because I was like forcing my music on them, but they did it, and they remembered it. But he's an actual practicing musician himself. But that was one of the first things he said. He's like, "Yeah, this is nothing like what you used to write back then." I'm like, "Okay,
Because
that's
it was better now.
well,
Or
certainly better."
what do you
And
mean?
right, exactly. I
Uh-huh.
had grown musically,
Okay.
and he wasn't there to see everything that happened in between because that was from childhood and adolescence, and now we were both adults. So
So did you keep on writing music in high school?
I wrote music from when I mean, yeah, straight through. I never stopped. There was never a period that I was not writing music.
Did you go to college?
Yes, and so I
For
all through all, and so I when I had this kind of not really breakup, the professor I alluded to earlier, um, that's when we kind of parted ways. Not really parted ways. We kind of made up before he died, thankfully. But yeah, this professor was really he's just kind of poured his whole soul into me. We would have these long sessions of just not just composition but vocal technique. He would play the piano and rehearse, have me sing pieces, and we talk about music history. I mean, he was a great mentor, and he was the one that saw that I had a future in music, but perhaps I was making a mistake by writing the kind of music that I was writing. I mean, ultimately he was wrong, but I didn't know that I was a young person. I was in my 20s, and he was a very knowledgeable man. He taught me a lot, but yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna. I didn't. We didn't have a direct confrontation, but like I heard what he was saying. I
what kind of music did he
completely.
want you to
Well,
work
that's a
on?
good question. Yeah, and we never got there,
Oh, okay.
right? But and of course it was still classical music, but it wasn't this very specific
Oh,
Catholic Latin classical church music.
I see. I
So
see.
I mean, it was super specific what I was writing. So it can
Right.
only be really done in a certain place in a certain way, and
Hmm.
so but that worked out. It worked
Yeah.
out super well and paved the way for me to do things that are different from that. Because obviously, I said I premiered an opera a couple of years ago. Opera has nothing to do with that, really. But if I hadn't established myself as this classical composer writing this Latin church music, I would not have had the opportunity to write that opera.
Right. I see what you mean.
That's not to say that if I composed something, if I made a career of doing the kind of music that he thought I should have been doing, that still might have gotten me to the same place. But we'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never know. I mean, it looks like you just listened to what God was saying and,
So
followed his lead. So it
exactly.
worked out. Um, so when you were in high school, I mean, not high school, but when you were in college, like what were your plans? I know you went into
See
college
that.
as a writer, but were you thinking, okay, I'm gonna be a writer when I
Yeah,
graduate,
composer. I mean, but like
or a composer?
that decision at 10 never left. And so that was the thing that was so frustrating for so many people around me. It's like you made this decision so early. And so my idea was just to keep perfecting what I was doing all along and going and being in these institutions, hoping that they will further me along in my goal. So I was only ever, I mean, composer, that was it for me. I knew
Your
it.
whole
I
life.
knew it. I
So
knew
you
it.
never looked at anything else. You
No,
never looked at a
no,
finance or
no, never,
never.
nothing. I was
Wow,
single
that is
minded, and
good.
so that's what just kind of drove people crazy. It's like what's wrong with you?
Because for one, like you said, it's not like a thing that everyone does, so people couldn't really even see the vision probably.
Right,
And then for two, it's like there's so much to do. You're young.
right.
You need to have fun,
Yeah.
and you
Well,
don't want to.
and trust me, I was having lots of fun. But as far as my life's work, that decision I made when I was a baby, and all through, going through grade school, high school, university, nothing changed except me trying to be better at doing what I said I was going to do.
Wow, that is That is just great. You never fell off of, what your goal was and
The goal was
what
there.
you were trying to do.
The road wasn't always easy, of course, right?
Yeah.
Trying to do something that basically was impossible.
And then I know you told me a little bit about this before, but where were your parents on the whole music thing? Like, did they want you to do the music because you were doing it since 10, or did they want you to get like a job
Of
or
course they did,
regular
because that
job?
people, it's hard to want something for someone that you can't put your finger on. You don't really know what it is yourself, right? Like, we were talking about, you didn't know that there are people still doing this, right? So how do you guide someone, like anyone, let alone your child? How do you guide them into something that you really have no concrete idea of what it is yourself, right? And so if you don't know what it is, how can your child know? Right? I mean, what must that be like for a parent? Which is why I give so much credit to Sister Lorraine, that she just kind of let me do what I was doing. She
Hmm.
didn't question it, and lots of other adults around me were questioning it. And so, to get back to my parents, they thought, well, you're a smart kid. You can always have music. All that's true. How about do something, a good God fearing job.
Yeah.
Get a decent job. Get a job. Get a job. I was like, no, no, I want to do this.
Cause I mean, how old were you when you started making money from being a
My
composer?
first, well, not as a composer, because the idea of a professional composer, that doesn't really exist. So you think of any of the great composers, they were either teaching or they were connected to some, in the old days, connected to some establishment. So the only establishments were like government. In this case, there would be the court, like there's kings and queens and all that stuff, or the church. Those are the only employers for music, right?
Hmm.
And so it's always connected to some sort of institution. And so composers were, so in the earliest composers, at least in classical music, were singers, because it was before really instrumental music came into being. And so they were singers, and so they were paid to sing, and then they also wrote music. And so I was really doing something extremely traditional, going about it this route, because I was singing and I did play, instruments in the beginning. I finally just kind of stopped specializing in the instruments when I knew I was going to actually devote myself to composing, and I really kind of sang all along, which is probably why I'm known mostly as a vocal composer.
Hmm. Okay. Can you tell us about that story though, when you first made money off of
Yeah,
your
in my first job as a musician was as a music director at a church, and I want to say in my late teens. So
like
that
19,
maybe
18?
a little earlier than that, yeah. So that that was something, because I had that title, music director, and of course everyone that I'm working with, and this wasn't a professional music establishment, so all the musicians I worked with were volunteer musicians, but they were all adults. So these were people all, old enough to be my parents. They were my parents' age, and they were singing in this choir that I was conducting. And so I would have rehearsals, and we would sing on Sundays, and I was getting a paycheck for that. And so I've never, for any long period of time, not had a church job. There was only one, I was going to say brief moment, but even then, I still had both. While I was teaching music in grade school, and then 1 year in high school, half a year in high school. There was that brief period where I did that for 10 years, actually. But that was at a choir school. So,
Mm. Okay, so you were about 17, 18. Oops, sorry about that. So you were about 17, 18, and you had that music director job at the church. How long did you do that? And what was next after that as
oh,
far as
yet
work?
another church job. Right. Yeah. So I just went from church job to church job.
And
Exactly.
being the music director at the
Exactly.
different
Yes.
churches.
Yes. Yes.
And how long did you do that until you just were
That's
like,
never stopped. Yeah, I'm still doing that.
oh, you still
Yeah, I'm
do
the
that?
music director where we are right
Oh,
now.
you're the music
Yeah,
director.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah,
So,
that never stops. That never stops.
okay. So you do music. So you're a music director at the church, but then also on your own time, you
Right.
write
Exactly. For
songs
my other customers, right?
for your customers. So
Right.
you have people that, okay, let's get into the business part of
Hmm.
it now a little bit. As far as your customers, how do you get them? Do they call you up? Do you go out cold calling and do sales? How does that work?
Yeah. So the whole idea of I'm trying to think if I ever cold called. I haven't, and I don't think it's a good idea. In fact, I think it's a bad idea to cold call. I mean, but but a musician has to market himself. So fortunately, always having these music director jobs, I'm composing music for the singers that I have. So for those, so like for that my first church job, I was writing music for that choir. In my late teens, and so I'm always writing music for the choirs that I'm director of. So at this place, I'm writing music for them. I mean, they sing something of mine pretty much every week, and so I'm constantly writing music for them. So you are establishing yourself, over the years with a large body of people. I mean, you have a captive audience every week, you know, more or less hearing your music. So the word gets out what you're doing, and people. A woman just yesterday, actually. She's a professional singer. She took a screenshot. I don't know where she was singing, but she said, "Oh, we're singing you tonight," and she just sent me that little text. So the word gets out, and it's largely word of mouth. And it's always been that way with the history of music, but now with social media and the internet, things get out really quickly. So I'm able to reach the whole globe now, whereas that before that would have taken decades if it would have happened at all. Because I've given conferences, as far away as Singapore and Malaysia, and I remember the woman that contracted me to do a conference in Malaysia. She said, "Oh yeah, people know your music here, and they quite enjoy it, so they would really enjoy this conference with you." So I mean,
That's
how is that
cool.
possible, right? But only because of the internet, so they can access the music.
Right.
But I
And you
mean,
said you work with that choir in France,
right,
right? And
exactly,
they're like a pretty big choir out there.
exactly.
So,
And
okay,
that's how they found my music. They heard some of my music on the internet, and they contacted me. We'd like to do your music.
right. Do you do any kind of promotion on social media? Like, do
I'm
you ever
supposed to.
do anything?
I'm supposed to. If I were a better businessman, that's what I would be doing. Maybe I should just start doing that tomorrow.
I mean, do you ever like? Because I looked at your social media. It looked just like a lot of like pictures of you going out with your friends and stuff. So I
Right.
was wondering, like,
That's a little embarrassing, but it's true. It's true. I should do better.
do
Mark
you?
Anthony, help me. I need to do better.
Yeah, I can definitely help you with that. You know, even just
I'm
like a,
terrible.
a selfie video, like, hey, I just wrote this new song.
I need to do that.
Let me know if you want to copy it or
Exactly.
something.
I'm going to tell you, one of my colleagues, it was a bunch of us, these are all working musicians. He said, "Kevin, you're successful in spite of yourself." That was a terrible thing to say, but he's
What is
right.
that supposed to
Well,
mean?
it just kind of happened. And so when I go to these conferences now and people ask, "Oh, Mr. Allen, I want to do this, how do I go about it?" I said, "Well, you have to establish yourself. You have to make yourself known. Do lots of performances and sing in lots of choirs, perform in lots of ensembles." I think because of the nature of social media, everyone wants things quickly. And so folks, they are great keyboard players, they're great violinists, they're great singers, and so they want the career, and without, to my mind, paying the dues. Not learning as much repertoire, learning, all sorts of music, and actually not just listening to it, on your phone or on your computer, but actually performing it. How do you do that? That means you have to get into someone's orchestra, get into someone's choir, and slog out those years of acquiring techniques, acquiring performance practice, acquiring repertoire, and just do it that way. It's the tried and true way. It's the way it's been done for centuries, and I think it still works. It can be enhanced by being accessible to a greater number of people than it ever could have been. Let's say in the days of Bach and Beethoven, right? They write a piece, their immediate community knows about it, and people may travel around, but now the whole world can know about it, and the second it's done. So we have a lot of advantages that way. So that's what I should take more advantage of those things. The accessibility for people to access your music without, let's say, traveling. The expense of traveling. Oh, I want to hear music by Kevin Allen. Oh, but I can't afford to take a plane. To go to Chicago. Well, there are pieces online they can listen and access it that way. And then that's how I get commissions. To kind of get back to your question, people will see a performance of mine. They contact my publisher, and then he'll let me know. Oh, these people want a piece, a 10-minute piece using these words. Do you think you want to do it? Then he'll put me in touch with them. And so that I'll get calls from him, or he'll email me or text me about that all the time.
Okay, so people get in contact with your publisher and they say they want a specific song
Right.
made,
Right.
or they want one of the songs that you've already made.
Well, they can purchase that music because he has a web store, so they can look through the pieces that I've already written. So they don't even need to contact with him for that. They just go to the website and buy it. But these are for new income, people that want to commission me to write something for them. That's how they go about it.
And when you write something for someone, do they own that song?
They have free use of it, pretty much however they want to. I usually retain the option of also using it.
Okay, so you can sell it to somebody
Exactly,
else or
exactly. So let's say
perform it.
you wanted to commission a string quartet, and I'm like, oh, of course, Mark Anthony, here's your string quartet. Perform it, do what you need to do with it, but then I will go and then publish it and then make additional income from it.
And then do you have like a lawyer that writes contracts and stuff for
I
you?
don't have a specific lawyer, but I have used lawyers. Actually, for the opera, there was an issue of figuring out who owns it, who can perform it. And so I didn't really like the initial contract. Apparently, it was a standard contract, but I mean, I didn't particularly care for it. So I had to lawyer up, as they say, and work out something amicable that they could use it, have free use of it, but I could also have free use of it. But I did not retain publication rights. We have to agree for publication rights, but that's the only kind of concession that I made in that particular instance.
Okay. So, okay, so you don't usually get a lawyer to write
It
contracts, just
usually
that
doesn't need it.
specific
Exactly.
situation.
Yeah, as needed.
And as far as getting paid from your music, you never get money directly from a customer.
Oh
They
yeah,
always,
no, I do. Yeah, if you
okay,
commission me for that string quartet, we set the terms. So usually I'll say, okay, your string quartet, okay, that's $10,000. You do a down payment of 5,000, and then I'll then pay the rest on completion.
okay,
But it won't cost you that much.
okay. You never did anything that cost that
Oh
much?
yeah, but not. No, I wouldn't charge you that much for a string quartet
Okay, I appreciate that.
though.
But for an opera, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Understood. Okay, so do people usually like write you checks or
Or
Z-
sometimes electronic.
you do like Zelle
Yeah,
and Apple Pay?
exactly. Yeah, right.
Okay, right,
We're in the
yeah.
digital age, man.
Right, we are in the digital age. I just
No Bitcoin yet, but I
right.
haven't been paid in Bitcoin yet, but we'll see.
And do you ever like stream anything, like
Um,
put anything on Spotify and
I
stuff
think there's
like
some
that?
things on Spotify maybe, but I never do any of that. If it's there, someone else has done it. For instance, there's a lot of recordings of my music online. I've never put one on online. Not one.
And you don't
I
care
should.
about if they're
I
getting
probably should
money
do
from
that.
it or anything?
Sometimes they are. There's some audio recordings. Someone say, "Oh yeah, I bought your CD." And it's like, well, I'm glad you bought it. So, but they think when they say that, they think they're supporting me. But yeah,
Right.
I don't get any money for that. So.
Okay. Are you? I mean, do you care or
Well, I haven't said anything about it. I haven't stopped it. So
okay? But it's not really all about money for you, though. It's just really about making the music for the most part
making the music is great,
in the
and I
process.
want money too.
And you want money
I
too.
just need to be a better businessman. So
Okay, well,
when
yeah.
I grow up, then I'll become a better businessman.
Okay, yeah, you could probably put, I mean, maybe you don't want to stop it, but you could probably like maybe get a lawyer or something, send
Right.
those people letters and
I would
say,
let bygones be bygones. We'll let that happen, but going forward, we'll do better.
be better for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so as far as what you have planned in the future, for your music and everything, what are your plans? Are you gonna like get? Are you trying to do more? You said you were trying to do more operas. Are
I
you
would
trying
love
to
to do
write
that.
any kind of different type of music? Are you sticking with the sacred music? How does all of that look?
You know, I the sacred music is familiar to me. It's comfortable, and I just enjoy it. Um, so I hope to continue to do that. I really would like to do more in the realm of opera, though. And as I said, it's an expensive toy. So, but we're kind of going through, at least in this country, and perhaps other countries, we're going through a new opera boom. I mean, there's a lot of new operas being composed now, and not just composed, but being performed by really good opera companies and really good performers. So the time is right to do it. In fact, I'm even a little late. Even though I've composed some little operas beforehand, I should be really churning them out now. But I'm not going to churn them out just to sit on the shelf. I have to be either commissioned or I know a planned project. And so there is one kind of in the talking, you know, talking phase. Now I've been talking about it for a year or two now, but we really need to get that going. And anyone else, some of your listeners, know of some project that we can work together to get another opera out. It's for me, it's getting the right subject. Not that I had the right subject for the last one. That was a complete commission. I wrote what they wanted, and I'm glad that it happened. I really like the piece. I still like the piece. I would like to do a lot more though. Maybe on not that that was on a big scale, but maybe on a smaller scale. It's a little more doable financially for people that are going to mount it because it
Mm,
is expensive to do operas. Even if you just do one performance of an opera, that's a huge expense.
like 10,000 or
Way more than that,
20,000?
maybe.
That's still on the low end.
Right. It
Dang.
is. It's not cheap. So, but you can write a check, right?
Right, right. You got to check and then it bounces. And
We don't want the bounce check.
right.
Those people want to get paid.
Nah, I know what you mean. Do you ever collaborate with people
I
and
would
like
love to.
co-write
I would.
songs
Oh yeah,
or music?
absolutely. I've been director of the polyphonic choir at the Monastery of the Holy Cross in Bridgeport, and I've composed pieces with the prior there, basically the priest that's in charge there, and he's a musician, quite a good musician, and we've composed pieces together. So
What does that look like?
it's he it's an old process. I mean, we didn't invent this. We write. I'll write this part, you write that part, and then we put them together. We kind of we have an idea of what each other's style, and so we try to make it seamless where it's not this just jarring like hodgepodge. And we performed one of those pieces that we composed together. I think at the last Vespers. It's about once a month that we sing or that we perform these pieces. And even the professional singers, they no one knows who composed what. When we do the whole piece, like we don't, they're not really sure, and the
Because
listeners don't know either. So we're really successful
because it
at doing
flows
that
together.
because it flows so beautifully together.
And are you guys together when you do that,
No,
or
no, he
you
does
go
what he
off on your
does,
own
and
and
I do
come
what I
back?
do. Exactly. And we
Interesting.
put it together, and it's worked fantastically. But also, the opera process is collaborative as well because the person that writes the words, I kind of have to work with them, not so much together, but they send me what they've written, and I say I need more vowels, because that's something that a lot of first of all, people that are writing librettos, that's what they call them, the words for operas. It's just not a lot of them like they used to be. So people aren't There are not very many people that say, "Oh, I've written, like 20 librettos for operas that have been performed." That's just not that. This is just not a thing today. So oftentimes you're working with someone who is maybe a good poet or a good writer of prose or fiction, and you kind of have to tell them, this is theater. So you have to get someone that understands theater and that collaborative process. I would love to do more of that.
Mm, I think you will. I mean, I know you're gonna going forward, you're
Yes,
gonna be switching things up, so we'll be looking out for that.
I hope so.
Okay, good. I wanted to know what advice would you give someone who wants to be a composer like you are? And I don't know if there would be different advice for someone who is younger, maybe in high school, and they want to do it compared to someone who's maybe older, maybe they have like a certain type of job or something. But like what advice can you give those two? And can you just kind of differentiate between like a high schooler and like an adult who has like a job and kids and stuff?
I think it would be the same advice for both people. Really hone your craft. Be expert at what you do. It's frustrating looking for opportunities, but in the meantime, when those opportunities aren't coming, or even if they are coming, if you have a solid technique. So for me, I started out with what's called counterpoint, writing for choirs. It has nothing to do with anything for opera, but it gives you a mastery of your techniques. So really know as much about, really be kind of the best composer you can be so that you're ready when those opportunities come. That's the best thing that I would tell, because I sometimes run into people. They say, "Oh, my high school daughter, really really excels at music. What can I do to help her? What can I tell her?" And I said, how literate is she musically? I mean, how well does she read music? Well, that's what I said. Make her do that. Make her study music theory. That's boring. It's not so much fun for many people, but have a thorough foundation in just the basics. Understand, you know, key relationships, understand tuning of instruments. How many strings, the violin plays, what notes the violin can play, as opposed to what the tuba can play or the trumpet. All of those, just have that stuff so that you know it, that it's in you, so that when you get these opportunities, when they finally do come around, you are ready to go. Just as when, my professor said, stop writing all this music that no one wants. I had this whole arsenal of music already, and then when the opportunity came, it's like, here it is. I'm ready to go. So I guess, to be prepared. And how do you prepare for something, a future that you don't know? Well, I think just be well versed in just the basics, the rudiments of music, music theory, music technique. And if you want to be someone that's writing, chamber music, then really study all the scores of chamber music that, first of all, is famous, whether you like it or not, pieces or not. And then, of course, study the music of people that you look up to as heroes. I think that's extremely helpful in the meantime until you get your opportunity.
Okay. And after they do all of that, become well versed with the music theory and listen to all the historic composers, after they do that, when it's like time for them to try to start making money, how would you suggest that they go about that? Would it be like get a publisher or
There's no money in publishing. You
okay?
go, it's for getting your name out there. No one's getting rich from publishing music, with some maybe rare exceptions. It's really, um, having your name in people's head. So I mean, if they know that your music is published, or they've heard that, so, oh yeah, we want to do this project. Oh wait, wasn't that piece? Didn't I see a piece of this guy somewhere? Let's look into him. Let's see how we can get in touch with him. Or, oh, wasn't she the one that was publishing with this publisher? Oh yeah, let's ask her to write this piece. So I mean, just making yourself present, and be in the right places. Go to concerts. Get to know musicians that are performing music, because often, if you're writing string quartets, and you want them performed, then go to concerts of performers that are performing string quartets and introduce yourself. There's sometimes receptions afterwards. Introduce yourself, and that's not the same as a cold call, but you maybe establish a relationship. Be your absolute charming self and make them want to inquire about you. It can work.
Okay, so they should more so try to get people to contact them, or
Yes,
try to contact people
absolutely.
to have them write a song,
Right.
or compose a piece of music for them.
Exactly.
Trying to get the technical terms
Right,
here,
right, right,
but
right. Yeah.
okay, so that's better than getting the publisher and just having people buy your music that
Right,
was
right.
already
I mean,
written.
it doesn't mean it's not either or though. You can still do that, but yeah,
But if
have
you want to make money, a
exactly.
lot of money, I guess,
Right.
but not be
Well, if you want
greedy.
to make a lot of money, art probably isn't the way to
Right. Okay.
go.
Unless you were just super famous or something,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good, good. Well, I thought we had a really good conversation here. And to wrap it up, can you just tell the listeners where they can maybe listen to your music, or, connect with you? Do you have a website, social
Absolutely.
media?
You can reach me. Well, first of all, you can find a lot of information about me by Googling Kevin Allen Composer, KEVIN Composer. And then there you'll find my publisher, which is Corpus Christi Watershed.org. Corpus Christi, like Corpus Christi, Texas. Watershed.org. And you can see a bunch of my music there. And if you want to purchase music, if you have performing groups, but those are the best ways to reach me and find out what's going on. Or come to Vespers at the Monastery of the Holy Cross, which is in Bridgeport, 31st and Aberdeen. They have a website that lists the performances. We generally perform once a month, about 8 months out of the year, and then take a break in the summer. But you can hear new music composed by the head of the monastery, Father Peter, and also music that I compose and music that we've composed together. So
Okay, nice. And if somebody wants you to like compose some music for them, should they just
contact my publisher, Jeff Ostrowski at corpuschristiwatershed.org.
Corpus
There's
Christi
probably
Watershed?
an info, on the website, and he'll
Okay.
get in touch with me, and then we'll get your piece written.
Okay. Awesome. Well, hopefully people reach out to you and want you to write some music for them, and that'll be good. But that concludes the Phwealthy Podcast. Thank you so much again for your time and your insight and just everything. I really appreciate it. And everybody listening, that concludes the podcast. Don't forget to stay positive, healthy, wealthy, Phwealthy. Have a good one.